You're listening to Speaking Side Mount, the podcast where we talk all things side mount diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and side mount diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top side mount divers. Whether you're new to side mount, been side mount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things side mount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet. Hey, welcome back to Speaking Side Mount. I'm Steve Davis. This episode is a premium Patreon-only episode, and I want to take a moment to thank all of our patrons for your support. It is huge in making everything you're about to listen to possible. If you're not a patron and would like to support the podcast, then please take a look at all of the options and benefits available at www.patreon.com/speakingsidemount. I'll add a link to the podcast notes. Now, in this episode, I speak to PJ Prinsloo. PJ is a technical diving instructor trainer and the director of technical diving for RAID South Africa. And as you'll hear, he is passionate about the benefits of side mount and has a wealth of knowledge from the perspective of a side mount diver, instructor trainer, and in his role at RAID. Earlier this year, PJ was inducted into the prestigious Explorers Club, and we go deep into his involvement in the stunning exploration of the Phoenician wreck in Schlendi Bay off the island of Gozo, Malta. As you know, I spent 2 amazing seasons at Gozo Technical Diving, and this is definitely a place very close to my heart. The exploration dives were at depths of over 110 meters with 3 to 4 hour dive run times, which took an immense amount of planning and attention to detail to execute safely. Now, we also discuss side mount diving and continue our voyage into the state of side mount diving and instruction. We talk about what it takes to be a great side mount instructor, the economic argument for focusing on smaller class sizes, and more attention to course quality. I get PJ's thoughts on optimizing your side mount setup, on sliding D-rings, and then we discuss side mount rebreathers and how he sees this through the students that come on his courses. We finish by reminiscing about our trips to Chuuk and the wrecks of Truck Lagoon. All this and much, much more in this episode of Speaking Side Mount. Hey PJ, welcome to Speaking Side Mount.
Steve, thanks for having me on the show. It's great to be one of the participants, and I'm looking forward to hearing our chat.
Yeah, thanks very much. Look, it's really good to catch up, and we're all locked down at COVID-19 now. I looked at my Terek here just a moment ago, 44 days out of the water. It's a tough time at the moment, isn't it? What are you doing to fill your time through the COVID-19 lockdowns?
Oh, well, yeah, this is the longest period I've been at home in I don't know how many years. Mm-hmm. So it's been good to catch up on some maintenance and all of those things that, you know, the wife saying, oh, that's broken, and I'll get to it in the next 6 months. So now I have no excuse. I've been busy with things around the house, and I'll do a lot of writing for RAID. So it's also given me the opportunity to catch up on some work that I have to get done other than diving.
Yeah, because it's amazing how busy we get once we're back in the water, hey, and that takes precedence over everything else. So to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into diving?
I started as a commercial diver. Eventually, when I couldn't find any more work, I got into recreational diving. Basically became a PADI instructor by the time I was about 1996, December 1996. And it just kicked off from there. Never, ever expected that it would become a long-term career, and 20 odd years later I'd be sitting here. So it's been a journey, it's been a wild ride, and I could never really imagine my life going any other way. The water has become such a big part of my everyday existence. It's everything that I do and walk and talk at the moment. From being a recreational instructor and being involved in dive retail over the years, I really enjoyed the teaching and educating. So I became more engrossed in that and eventually becoming an instructor trainer. And during that journey, started getting into technical diving. I've heard this more times than I can remember. Every instructor saying, I'm going to do technical diving for me. It's my thing.
Yeah.
It's my breakaway from doing open water students day in, day out. I got into tech. It's for me. I got into cave. That's just for me. Then I got into CCR. That's just for me. It's just an animal you can't control. Once you want to educate everybody at everything. Really excited to be involved in an industry at a point in time where I think there's some massive change happening. COVID-19 is certainly going to throw a spanner in the works. The way the industry is going to come out on the other side of this, maybe more mature, maybe more professional, leaner, meaner. So it's an interesting time, and let's see what happens.
Yeah. There's always the seeds of opportunity, isn't there, in something like this? I think a lot of people are getting stronger through this. They're getting more strings to their bow. They're doing online courses, online training. They're doing digital marketing, which they never had time to do before. I mean, I was the only guy doing a podcast like this a while ago. And now we've got a whole lot running on YouTube, which are really fantastic. And I compliment them. I think they're doing a great job. It's really cool to see that. But at the same time, there is some real danger in this as well, isn't there? I mean, I'm really fearful for some of the dive operators and dive shops who've been closed down and have no opportunity whatsoever to trade. I mean, it's going to be really tough. So I'm sort of hoping that everyone comes out of this okay, because I think we will come out stronger. New Zealand here, we're about to go down to what we call level 2 next week. And that means we can dive again. And so I'm so excited by just that.
Oh, that's exciting, yeah.
Yeah, because we've pretty much been locked out of the water. It hasn't been physically prevented, but all the dive shops are shut. So unless you've got your own compressor and everything, you can't get a fill, and none of the dive operators can take boats out. That hopefully will change next week. And so, yeah, it's a real excitement building. And I think we're going to see a lot of local diving. You know, many people were planning overseas trips, but the local thing's going to be the thing for us for a while. Okay, well, look, you started there with something really interesting for me, which was you mentioned you started life as a commercial diver. And I know a couple of others. I know John Chatterton was that way as well, who I trained on advanced rec with. And he was a tremendous diver, looked different in the water from most technical divers that I'd seen, but again, was just a phenomenal diver. So how would you contrast commercial diving, technical diving, and recreational diving?
Well, as a commercial diver, you're really just an underwater laborer. There's no finesse involved. It's just get down there, make sure you're breathing, and get the job done. There was a lot of challenge in commercial diving. And when I became a recreational scuba instructor, I was already very comfortable underwater. And being comfortable underwater made it easy for me to take control of situations. So teaching became second nature. So being confident and comfortable underwater, just from my commercial experience, gave me a lot of confidence in teaching. I was able to be calm and resourceful underwater. So when I became a technical instructor, one of the reasons that tech drew me was that with recreational diving, I didn't feel the same challenges that I felt with commercial diving. So the technical diving added that additional challenge. It added that complexity to my diving. It was more than just having a look at a fish. It was going back to equipment intensive, pushing the limits. And that's what drew me to technical diving. Just missing that challenge of the commercial work. But I must say it's a lot more fun because I don't have to be at 50 meters on a very lean helium because helium was so expensive. So you're just diving on mostly air in those days. So it's nice to be down there on a gas mix of your choice, fumbling around, having a look at things and taking photos and just being with your mates, having a good time. Complete contrast to the complexities of commercial diving.
Yeah, and you use the term finesse too, and that's, I think, one thing that I've noticed in the top technical divers, certainly the people I've dived with and have been exposed to, is just how comfortable and how relaxed and how slow and precise they are in the water.
Yeah, I must say, slow is good. If there's one thing I say, and I say it to a lot of my instructor candidates and dive master candidates, I'm here for a dive, not a swim. You know, I don't want to be motoring around on the reef, and I'm not in a competition to get to some point. I'm just cruising around. I'm here for a good time. We're recreational divers. Even if I'm at 100 meters, I'm a recreational diver, and I want to swim around and see the sights and take it all in. So slow and steady, calm and collected.
Yeah,
that's how I like to dive.
Yeah, more fun and I think safer as well, right?
Absolutely. You need to get back.
Exactly, we all do. So I read in your bio that you were involved in a serious car accident back in I think it was the 80s or 90s, and were told you could never dive again. I mean, I can't even comprehend what that would feel like. Could you talk about that experience and how you got yourself back in the water?
Yeah, it was challenging. I was a young guy and I just kind of got into recreational scuba instruction. I just started in a resale store and my whole life was ahead of me. So it was a huge setback, and spent a few months in hospital. But coming from a commercial background, and then as a youngster, I was fighting fit, and I didn't want to let this setback hold me back for the rest of my life. I didn't expect that I would not be able to dive afterwards. I wanted to stay fit in the hospital so that when I came out, I could continue diving. So in my physio, I worked hard. I pushed harder than anyone else in the hospital, and made sure that I did push-ups in the bed and whatever I could to maintain some sort of strength in my body, only to be told when I went to go and see the diving medic that I was done for. That was it. It was a crushing blow, having just started this new retail store. So I got out of the industry immediately. I was like, well, you know what? I'm not going to hang around. I'm not going to sit in a store and be a storekeeper while all my mates are out there having a good time and diving. So I took a different path for a couple of years. But 2 years later, it was enough. I really needed to get back in the water. And I went to see a doctor, and they said, look, take it easy, do shallow dives, one step at a time. And I took that as my thumbs up. And from that point on, I never looked back. And today I'm doing, 100 plus meter dives on deep explorations and massive cave exploration. So it's, it was something that I was just never going to let hold me back. I had too much I wanted to do.
I love that. And obviously the mental attitude that must have gone with you being in hospital and then making the decision that you're going to work on yourself physically while you're in hospital, that must have taken some mental application too, because I guess that's what comes first, isn't it? It's the mindset that, hey, I'm getting out of this, and then the physical thing follows.
Yeah, and my wife will attest to the fact that I'm not really good at sitting still. We go on holiday, it takes me a few days to disconnect and, put my phone down and and speaking of the phone, I can hear my phone ringing in the background.
We'll just deal with that. It happens.
Give me a sec.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so you've got a huge amount of experience as an instructor trainer, I think both with SDI, TDI and RAID. What are your underlying principles when it comes to producing instructors?
Well, there's so many aspects to an instructor. They have to be an educator, but at the same time, they have to be experienced in the water. So I expect an instructor candidate to be able to demonstrate a skill in a calm manner, showing all the points, etc., etc. That's a given. Any dive master instructor should be able to do that comfortably with his blindfolded and neutrally buoyed. But an instructor also needs to have empathy. They need to realize that they're not there for a quick buck. They're not there to get their student in and out of the pool in 2 hours. The idea is, as a new diver, someone that has no experience, and give them the best experience that they can so that they will come back. Far too often, we see open water students that are rushed through a course and they disappear and they never come back to the industry because they've never been shown the full, true scuba experience. But I have seen students that are mentored correctly, students that are given the time to perfect their skills and to become comfortable underwater, do come back to the sport because they enjoyed the whole experience.
Yeah.
So an instructor candidate must have empathy and must have patience. Often I know that it's the dive store owner's fault. He's the one that's pushing for profit. He's the one saying, you got to cut down the water time. We can't afford an extra airfill for this guy, or we can't afford an extra pool session. So it's often not the instructor's fault. And some of our young instructors are doing the best. But if an instructor rushes through things, we'll never see that student again.
Yeah. I wonder whether there's a focus on the costs associated with courses rather than looking at it in a business sense from the revenue side. So when you get the situation you're talking about where you rush someone through a course and you have such a low uptake of those divers into becoming real divers, which are divers that go out and dive on a regular basis, and you look at the ongoing spend and the lifetime value of a diver, and you contrast that with someone who, hey, has a more expensive course, yes, the costs are higher, I spend a bit more time with them, I had to do an extra day or 2 or 3 or whatever it takes. Maybe the class sizes are smaller as well. But then the lifetime value of those divers as they come out of the course and they keep diving and come back to the shop and they buy gear. And it should be a no-brainer, shouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much value in potential future spend of a student. And as a primarily tech instructor, I rely heavily on open water students coming into the market so that in 3 to 5 years' time, I have a pool of students that I can teach. Without those entry-level divers coming in, I don't have much of a future going forward.
Yeah. And I think I read something from Paul Toomer a while ago about growing the dive industry. And I think he did an analogy with cycling, about how inclusive cycling is and growing the market. And there isn't any reason why there can't be as many divers as there are cyclists. I 100% agree with that. And I think it is one of the things that we've got to look at as an industry is how do we get more divers to come in and how do we produce better divers? Because again, especially when you're a new diver, often you do know that your skill set isn't really there. And then you're a little bit afraid to go out on a boat trip because you're not confident in your own skills. Yeah. And when you do see good divers, you're embarrassed perhaps. And sometimes you forget which way the regulator goes onto your cylinder or which way the cylinder fits into the back plate or BCD. So all of those things are barriers to people diving again. And it's just so important. Number one, that we're bringing people in the front end and growing the market. But number two, I used to work in software and software as a service. And one of the things that we were really, really big on was churn, which is about people who don't remain customers and who give up using your software. And I think churn and diving is another thing. Once you bring them in, how many of them stay with diving? How many dive, 10 to 20 to 30 to 50 or more dives per year? Because they're the people who are going to be your customers. The ones who come in 3 years later, they put 50 dives a year down or 100 dives a year down as what we would call part-time divers. They're the ones who are going to have the passion and the skill set to come to you in a couple of years, 3 years, and go on to technical levels.
Definitely, yeah.
Let's get on to side mount a bit. How does side mount fit within all of the diving you do?
It's interesting. I became a side mount diver in, I think it was 2010 or 2011. And it was for no particular reason. It wasn't because I had some sort of exploration activity that I wanted to do. It was just noticing that suddenly there was this thing called side mount and it was building traction in the market. Mm-hmm. And I better get on board this train because it's definitely gaining in popularity and people are talking about it. For the first couple of years, not much happened with my side mount diving or my training. And I think a lot of equipment at that stage was still limited, particularly in South Africa. We didn't have access to gear that was off the shelf, so to speak. I don't know exactly when, but at some point I just started diving more and more side mount than I did back mount. And I think it was maybe an age thing. I did feel that it was easier for me to carry 2 cylinders down to the water than having a big twin set on my back. So fast forward to today, and I either have a rebreathe on my back or I have side mount. I haven't dived a twin set since 2017, I think.
Wow, congratulations.
And I really do enjoy it. I know that there's always this debate about whether it's the right thing for open water and all those ongoing debates. But the reality is, for me, I find it really comfortable. It's an easy way to dive. It's one of the best ways to get into trim. And there's so much that you can do. It's so flexible and so easy. I certainly wouldn't really want to dive on a rib with 6 cylinders off our shores. That's kind of, I think, the limitation. But 6 cylinders, maybe in fresh water where I can stand there and take the time to get my kit on, and that's a different story.
Yeah. Are you really going to do that? I mean, you're a rebreather diver as well. Are you going to dive 6 cylinders open circuit?
It's not something that I'll do out of choice. No, no. There's no other options available, and for whatever case, but it would never be something I'd do out of choice. No. So now it's become my preferred open circuit way of diving. And whenever I do any recreational dives of my own, I'll be inside mount, whether it's in a cave or whether it's offshore. It's just the way I prefer to dive.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Contrary to popular opinion, I don't have anything specific against back mount apart from the fact that I don't do it. But I kind of feel, when someone's coming to technical diving from a single cylinder back mount open circuit, going through the levels there, and you're a rescue diver, or maybe you're looking at going beyond that, you've really got a choice, haven't you? When you want to go to technical diving, you either go back mount or side mount. And one of the things I'm really talking to people about here in New Zealand is just make a decision. they both have advantages. Yeah, sure, there's advantages to back mount. There's times when it is an easier way to dive, but my feeling is most of the time side mount gives you so much more flexibility and so many more options. And as you said, it's just a really comfortable way to dive. It's a genuine option and has been for some time, but I think now it's becoming commonly known that it's a really good option when you want to go to multi-cylinder diving. And yeah, taking it to 4 cylinders isn't really a big deal. Going beyond that, I think now with the advent of rebreathers, not that they've just come along, but they're really coming into their own now. And I think now if you want to go deeper and you need 6 cylinders, or if you want to stage into a cave and you need to carry that much, then it's probably time to look at a rebreather. Certainly that's what drove me to rebreather diving, was both depth and distance, both of those factors. So the pictures I've seen of you with your side mount configuration, it looks very much like a Mexico style. You've got a left short hose, long hose on the right with a breakaway. Where did you learn to side mount dive? And did you then take that from side mount into cave training after that?
Well, I learned in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I did my side mount training. My side mount instructor was Tom Johnson from Deo Scuba in Florida. From there, it's morphed into so many different things. I'm lucky that I get to travel as much as I do, and I get to dive with as many people as I do. And I take away so much from so many people and students as well that have come along the way, and they've been tinkering and playing around. And I'll say, well, that's a great idea. I'll give it a go. And I'll never say that I have a particular style and this is my style, and every student that comes into my program needs to leave looking like me, because I learned that wasn't the way that I felt comfortable. I don't dive like any of my instructors do. I dive the way I do because I've found certain ways of doing things that are maybe the best. I want to know that if I'm in a bind, that I can get out of it because I'm comfortable in my gear. And I can't expect a student to be forced into a particular configuration because of me. It's got to be something that he or she has got to be able to deal with and be comfortable with to sort out. So in my journey, I've definitely become more prone to a Mexican style than a Floridian style. I don't know, maybe it's just I dive a lot with alley tanks, so I find it a bit easier, with alley tanks. And I've had so many different harnesses along the way, from Scuba Pro to Apex and fin sub. I've been diving a lot with the fin sub harnesses. I've had 2 different fin sub harnesses. And now, thanks to the support of X-Deep, I'm getting into an X-Deep harness as well. And all of those harnesses have gone through so many different modifications and changes as my gear changes, as I find I'm using different exposure suits. So I was in an Apex suit and now I'm in an Otter suit. So I'm using my Otter dry suits. And I've got 2 different suits, and I find that I've got to tweak things slightly depending on which suit I'm in. It's a journey. Side mount never ever ends. Yeah, I don't think that I'm on my final setup now.
No.
If we speak again in about 5 years' time, maybe I'll be closer to saying, this is it. I'm done. I haven't made a single change in 10 dives.
It'll never happen. And partly because I think it's one of the fun parts about side mount diving. During the lockdown, I've spent a fair bit of time in my garage there looking over my 5 different harnesses that I've got. I have to admit, one of them is a teaching harness, but I've got an X-Deep Classic in there, which was my very first one that I trained in and dived all the way to Normoxic Trimix on that. Not the best BCD, I'll have to admit, for that, but it worked and was fine. That one's sitting at the back and doesn't get used a lot anymore. And then I've got several tech harnesses. One is a teaching harness, but the other one, I've got a rec that is my tropical go away configuration. And then I've got a new one that was an Ed Sorensen mod that is for the KISS Sidewinder. And so that's got some mods on there to help me put the Sidewinder on and so on. And so I've got a separate one for that. And I love them all. And it's so fun to be able to go through and set them up. And I've done a few tweaks on them while I've been dry here, which I hadn't been able to do. And looking forward to getting them back in the water for sure. So I understand that completely. As I said, I've added some Sump UK little bits and pieces on there. And I'm still trying to find the perfect sliding D-ring. All of those sort of things are challenges.
Sliding D-rings. Look, if I use, as I mentioned, aluminium tanks and alley 80s. I can't get away with not having sliding D-rings.
No.
I've tried fixed D-rings. I've tried multiple types of sliding D-rings, and I'm still kind of not 100% certain which is the best system.
Are you diving your alleys in salt or freshwater?
Both.
Yeah, because alleys and salt are a real handful. So I mean, they're not too bad in freshwater, but and salt, they're a handful, and you can use fixed, but what you find, of course, then is that you're in trim maybe for a period of time, and then then they're out of trim, then you move them to the next fixed point, and now they're out of trim for a while, and then they're back in trim. So I love sliders because you can have infinite adjustments. And to be honest, I've had lots of information. I've tried lots of them. The best ones I've found are the Tom Steiner buckle, a low-profile D-ring on a buckle. It takes up a little bit of space, but I'm not very big, and so there's not very far around my midsection, but they work fine, and they're infinitely adjustable in both directions. So that to me is the perfect thing. But I know there's actually somebody pointed one out to me the other day that they'd made, and they said that worked too. So I think whatever works, but the idea is that you want to be infinitely adjustable, especially with alleys. And then the challenge is, of course, if you're in a dry suit, cooler water and alleys, then you need to carry a fair bit of weight, which is why I don't personally tend to dive them very much here in New Zealand, because I'm normally in a dry suit in salt water. We could do in fact, I have done several episodes on that now, and several parts of episodes.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's,
we could go on for hours talking about sliding D-rings. I have 2 sets in my toolbox that I take with me to every dive site, because I think I'm going to try these ones.
Yeah.
And I never really get there, but
I'm taken to having a box of them for my courses, so I let my students try lots of different ones before they choose what they want to buy. And I'm pondering, I started life as a fitter welder, would you believe, and I'm pondering getting myself back into MIG or TIG welding and trying to weld some of my own up, because they're a little expensive to buy those sliders. So anyhow, let's move on. So I know you know Brendan Allen, and I had a really neat discussion with him in the last episode about the state of side mount diving, and we were kind of lamenting a little bit about the state of some divers, but really the diver is the result of the instruction. So really we're lamenting about side mount instruction. And I think there's a lot of great instruction going on around the world. I think it's improving dramatically, and especially in places where are hotbeds like Mexico, for instance. There's a lot of really good side mount instruction going on there, and in Florida and parts of Europe and elsewhere. But there's also a lot of really poor side mount instruction going on as well. And we were kind of discussing the problems and then trying to come up with some solutions. What are your thoughts on the challenge of producing, let's call it, really good quality side mount instructors that then produce great side mount divers?
Well, I think one of the challenges that dive centers face is they don't rely on side mount for income. It's kind of one of their specialties. Mm-hmm. So they're focusing on training entry-level divers and trying to get their Con Ed numbers up. And hopefully they can get a few side mount guys in there. So I would say probably the majority of side mount instructors who are not true side mount instructors, full-time side mount instructors, are the typical recreational scuba instructor that is just teaching side mount as a specialty from time to time. And we've both been diving side mount for many, many years, almost exclusively other than rebreather. And we're still tinkering. We're still trying to find that groove and trying to perfect it. And someone that's teaching recreational programs 80 to 90% of the time isn't going to have that exposure and that practice and skill level to produce a rock-solid side mount diver. A side mount instructor, much like any other tech instructor, needs to almost specialize. You can't wear every single hat. It's just impossible. I know that when I started getting into tech as a tech instructor, it was really hard for me to wear my open water instructor scuba cap today, and tomorrow I'm now teaching someone how to dive to 60 meters or 100 meters. And then tomorrow I'm teaching them how to dive in a rebreather, and then I've got a guy doing a rescue course. It's too much. So if you're looking for a good tech or side mount instructor, it's got to be somebody that does side mount or tech full time and doesn't get too caught up in recreational training. They just won't have the practice.
Yeah.
They won't be doing the diving.
I 100% agree with that. And one of the things I mentioned to Brendan is I wonder why side mount is a specialty. It's an equipment configuration. So twin set isn't a specialty. So why is side mount a specialty? I think that's perpetuating that problem of just appears in all of the agencies' course offerings. Therefore, it's in a dive store's offerings. And I wonder whether it shouldn't be removed from there. And I'm a TDI instructor, so I'll use the terminology I'm most familiar. But at the intro to tech level, it's a really good level for side mount. I argued against that as well because now I'm dismissing recreational side mount diving. I don't have a good answer for that, whether, I believe side mount diving should be used at a sub-tech level. I mean, I do a lot of recreational dives and side mounts, so there's nothing wrong with that. But I kind of feel like that's the level it fits in. It's at that point where you say, hey, I need the redundancy. I want the extra gas. And so now the question is it twin set, is it side mount? And that's where it should fit in, because at that level, you're now starting to get a higher competency of the instructor. Well, you should be. And generally, they've done a lot more diving, a lot more training. I think of myself, I mean, when I started instructing side mount, I've been diving side mount exclusively for 2 years. So I had several hundred side mount dives under my belt before I became an instructor in side mount. I'm not saying everyone should do that. That was just my particular circumstances that drove that. But the level that I was at that point, I was a superior side mount diver already when I started, and that was many years ago now. I really do quite passionately feel that's kind of where side mount diving should fit. I know you're involved with RAID, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I wonder whether there's an opportunity for an agency really to take that on and to put it in the right place within its portfolio of dive courses. I think when we see side mount associated with cave training, and that's why, Mexico and Florida things seem to be better in genuine cave regions. I know in Mount Gambier in Australia, where there's caves, there's good side mount instruction there as well. It's when you get away from those areas and you're in the more kind of recreationally focused open water areas that you see that, the standards start to fall away, because you have to be bloody good to go in a cave, right? You should be.
Yeah, you should be.
Anyhow, there's another rant. How does that sit with you, what I was saying there?
If we look at the progression of a diver, they'll come into the sport diving whatever they've been taught.
Mm-hmm.
So RAID as an agency was born out of rebreathers. So people were doing open water training with a recreational rebreather. Is it right or wrong? Who knows? But I think that even divers that in cold water areas, they'll start diving in a dry suit. They'll do open water in a dry suit.
Yeah.
And for them to move across to diving in a wetsuit is a thing. They almost, why isn't there a wetsuit specialty for people that are coming from dry suit to wetsuit? There's so many different aspects to how you start off.
Yeah.
And what is your base of knowledge? So can divers learn diving on side mount? I don't see why not, as long as the training is rock solid.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. It's a little bit like how we're now starting to teach everyone neutrally buoyant, right? Only a few years ago, that was heresy, and you had to kneel on the bottom because it was the only way to keep everyone under control. I know it because I've seen it and I've done it. You can put a brand new student in the water and you can get them neutrally buoyant pretty close to dive 1 or dive 2. If you show them the right way, they can absolutely do it. And I do agree, there isn't any reason why you couldn't teach open water and side mount. You just have to start them out that way. I guess, as you say, it's just making sure that the instructor knows what they're doing. They have the experience to be able to pass it on. And that was what I was saying. There is genuinely an argument against my premise that it should be stuck up at intro to tech, because what you're saying is quite correct. It can be used in recreational diving. And look, I would say of my own diving, maybe 70% of my own diving is a recreational dive. Or they're all recreational, but what I'm saying is there's no deco involved. There's no overhead involved. Yeah, do you need side mount for that? No, I just prefer it. I like it. I like the comfort of having more gas and the redundancy if something goes wrong. I'm a little bit afraid now when I put a single cylinder on my back. What happens if something goes wrong?
Yeah, well, I think, there's an argument, whether it's a twin set or whether it's a single with a stage, bailout, or whether it's side mount. I have a strong feeling that any dive leader should have some sort of redundant gas.
Yeah,
I've seen far too many divers get themselves into trouble where they don't understand their computer or whatever the case may be, but they suddenly sitting on a safety stop and they don't have enough gas, or they've looked at their computer and they got 10 minutes of deco and they've got no gas left.
Yeah.
Or they're just on the bottom and haven't been monitoring the gas.
Yeah.
And the dive leader is the one that should be able to come to the rescue, so to speak.
Yeah.
And what better way than having a redundant gas supply, an independent gas supply like side mount?
Yeah, agree completely. Yeah, I think a pony bot or a stage should be compulsory, shouldn't it, for dive guides and instructors. Well, look, thanks for that. Moving on, we've talked about rebreathers a little bit, and I know you wrote the manual for RAID for the Liberty side mount CCR. Side mount rebreathers are really all the rage at the moment. I mean, how do you see the market in terms of side mount rebreathers right now?
Well, I'm getting a lot more interest in side mount rebreather training than I'm getting in back mount rebreather training.
So interesting.
At the moment. which is interesting. And it's coming from a number of angles. People that are either side mount divers already that don't want to go back to back mount because they're side mount. So they want to extend their dive times without adding additional cylinders. Well, let's just go rebreather. And if I'm going to go rebreather, I'm going to go side mount rebreather.
Yeah.
So that's the one aspect. And the other aspect, and particularly of the Liberty side mount, is people are using it as a redundant rebreather. So a bailout rebreather. So I'm getting guys that are coming to do training on the side mount rebreather so that they can eventually use it as a bailout rebreather. So there's two very different people that are approaching me about training on the unit. So it's really interesting. And the people that you're training are at very different levels in terms of their diving ability. Somebody that wants to use a second rebreather as a bailout is usually a guy that's got a few hundred hours of CCR diving, and they could be hypoxic divers or cave divers who would really want to push the limits or penetrate a lot further, and they feel that with a bailout rebreather that's the way to go. And I don't think that there were many people 10 years ago that thought that we'd be running around with two rebreathers on us.
No, for sure.
I think it's indicative of where rebreathers have come. They are coming into their own, and they are, dare I say it, becoming more reliable, or the technology's at a point where we have faith in them.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of aspects to that. I think absolutely the technology is improving, and it's improving very quickly, I think, is one thing. But then I think the other thing too is there's been a lot of accidents. I mean, let's be blunt, but a little bit like cave accidents, one hopes that we learn from those. And with the advent of a lot of the work that's been done around human factors with diving as well, with Gareth Locke and so on, there's a lot of work going into what I believe is genuinely making the highest level of diving, in fact, all levels of diving, but particularly at the higher levels, making it much safer because we're looking at everything, every aspect that goes into it. One thing I found really interesting, I spoke to both Toddy Thorstenwalder and Brian Kaycock about their use of redundant rebreathers on some of their big exploration dives. Both those guys said, hey, listen, this isn't trivial. You certainly don't think about this in your first couple of hundred dives. And in the last episode with Brian, he was talking about how difficult it is to manage two rebreathers. It's tough enough managing one in terms of managing the loop and your PPO2 and everything that goes with that. But now double that with the knowledge that you need to know the PPO2 in both rebreathers. You need to make sure they're both breathable at all times. So that's not trivial at all, is it? And in fact, a couple of them have said they don't actually enjoy diving it. They do it for a reason, but it's not a lot of fun because of the task loading that goes with it.
Yeah, there's definitely an exceptional amount of task loading. I know for me, the only reason I'd ever want to go off my rebreather is that I need something to breathe and I need it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If my only other choice was another rebreather, man, it would take a lot of internal struggle for me to take this loop out of my mouth and go on to another loop. And that adds seconds of precious life that you're kind of sacrificing to say, okay, do I trust this thing enough? And then adding to that the process to make sure that the gas is breathable. So checking the handset, is the PPO2 right? Is the gas circulating? Is there enough loop volume inside that loop for me to suddenly just go on to and bang a breath out of it? Is the MAV working? Or there's so many things that have to go through your head before you have a breathable gas in your mouth. So it's definitely a tool that one could use to maybe reduce the number of open circuit cylinders you're using in an extended push through a cave, or reduce the number of cylinders that you carry on a deep ocean dive or something. But am I going to give up some sort of open circuit gas? Probably not. I need to breathe something. I want to get onto it quickly. Even if it's to take 2 breaths or 3 breaths or 5 breaths or 5 minutes of breathing so that I can get the other rebreather alive. And so it's a tool that has lots of potential, and I believe maybe in the future we'll see a lot more of it happening. We'll see a lot more people using redundant rebreathers, but is it going to be the only thing that they carry? Absolutely not.
Yeah, there's just so much comfort in going back to open circuit when your rebreather's not working, that's for sure. Let's take it off topic a bit from there. You became a member of the Explorers Club, I think it was in March this year, and by the way, congratulations, it's such an awesome achievement.
Yeah, it's an honor.
Fantastic. Can you share something about some of your favorite exploration projects that you've been involved in?
Well, I'm not fortunate enough to have lots of cave to penetrate, and I'd have to say that cave is probably my favorite form of diving, but we don't have much access to cave exploration in South Africa. So I'm looking at further into Africa, on the east coast of Africa, to see what we can find. Those explorations are going to be interesting. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we've got a few projects that have been held back. One that I was looking forward to doing in December this year. But watch the space; those will come online soon, hopefully. I've done a few wreck explorations. Definitely one of the most awesome experiences I've done is being part of the team on the Phoenician wreck in Malta. I will still never forget what I was looking at when I went down onto that wreck for the first time. When I joined the team, the first dive that you do is just to kind of, get your bearings and take it all in before they expect you to do any graft on the wreck. And just coming down that line, and you get to 110 meters, and there's this one big light that's lighting up the sort of amphora field. And when you're hovering over this lot, and you realize that nobody has been here thousands of years. The last person to possibly have touched or held this object was almost 3,000 years ago.
Amazing, isn't it?
There's so much history there. I mean, it's one thing, World War II wreck, there's so many documentaries about World War II, and you see so much of it on any Discovery or National Geographic. We're exposed to it so much. And it's still current history. It wasn't that long ago, but definitely getting onto that Phoenician wreck and just taking a moment to absorb the fact that this is so old. This is ancient history. Your head starts going through all sorts of scenarios. How did this thing get you? What story does it tell? Where was it coming from? Where was it going? And why did it end up sinking in Schlendi?
Yeah.
What's below the sand? We're currently excavating and trying to get rid of the sand that the wreck is buried under. And who knows what we'll find? It could be anything. Find the first cell phone. It was buried. It's a massive conspiracy by somebody to bury the first electronic device. Or there could be, who knows?
There was a bit of a funny, but having lived on Gozo for a couple of seasons and worked at Gozo Technical, there's a site near Shara called Gargantia, and it's got the ruins there. This is on land, obviously, of a civilization that predates the pyramids. And that's one of 3 civilizations that was there. And each one died out. They don't know very much about them, but one died out, then the next one came, then that one completely died out, and another one came. And so the history of that part of the world is just immense. And so you can imagine it's an island, right? So for different civilizations to get there over those timeframes, they must have come by sea. What you're seeing is almost certainly part of one of those. It's so special, it's a really great place. I've had a little touch, and I've dived Schlendi quite a few times, and I've done a 65-meter dive along the wall there, and there's a few amphora parts there. It's a bit naughty. I don't think you're really supposed to dive there. I didn't find that out till afterwards, but we didn't touch anything. We left everything as we found it, but it was just awesome to be able to see that and to realize that what we're looking at is probably several thousand years old, and that's nothing on what you guys are working on there. So yeah, it must just be amazing. And of course, I think it's one of the only archaeological explorations that's taking place deeper than 100 meters, right? It's an immense diving project in itself to do this, isn't it?
It's taking a big team. We're doing weeks of work. 3 weeks last year. And between the team, we did 17 days of diving over those 3 weeks. And only 10% of that time was spent on the bottom. That just goes to show the limited time that we have working at that depth. When you're down there and you say, well, okay, our dive time is going to be 20 or 22 minutes. But you're working, and as you're working, you're discovering and you're finding things, and you want to go a little bit deeper and just a little bit deeper. And you think, well, let me do another minute and see if I can dig a little bit deeper. And in that minute, you've clocked up another 20 minutes of deco. So you spend 20 to 30 minutes in the water, and you're doing a 3 to 4 hour dive, sometimes a bit longer. So we're putting in so much water time for so little bottom time. And it's going to take the team a very long time to eventually achieve everything that we need to get done on the wreck. And we have an incredible team. Guys from all over the world that are working on the project. And it's really exciting to be a part of it. And I found myself very lucky to be there.
Sounds immense. And I'm just thinking through everything now about how you plan those dives. Number one, the planning of the dives. And you would need a very large team, wouldn't you? Because, it's not every day you're going to do a 100-meter dive back to back, right? I'm assuming that you don't do that.
Yeah.
So
We have an incredible team, and really it works like clockwork. It's one of the most professional teams I've ever been lucky to be involved with. At no point on any of the dives did I ever feel like what I'm doing is really dangerous. If you have to put it into perspective, yes, you're diving a rebreathe at 110 meters and you're working underwater and you're looking at this 4-hour dive time. So yes, in many senses it is dangerous, but because of the confidence of the team and because the team is so rock solid, the plan is so well thought out and the execution is done so well, it builds a lot of self-confidence in your role in the job. And I think everyone on the team feels a lot better for it.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're there in the summer as well.
Yeah, September.
It's a pretty benign place, Gozo, as well. It's not a place where you get a lot of bad weather that time of the year, nor is there a lot of current and that sort of thing. So I guess that helps from that point of view. You're not fighting the elements all the time either. It's just really executing the dives, right?
Yeah.
That's super interesting. And if anyone wants to look at that, I'll put a link to the Phoenician Shipwreck project in the podcast notes. So you can look at some of the background on that, because it really is an interesting project from the point of view of the diving that's being executed, but also what they're finding historically and archaeologically. So, amazing. So I saw a brilliant shot of you a few days ago when you were on the bow gun of the San Francisco Maru and Truck Lagoon, one of my favorite all-time dives. And I'm dying here right now because I'm due to fly out in 3 weeks to Japan and then to Guam and then on to Chuuk. And of course, that's all out the window. And maybe I get to go next year now, so I'll have to count the days for another year. But yeah, I guess we can lament a bit at the moment about not being able to go to Truck, but let's do better than that. Let's reminisce a bit about some of your favourite dives in Truck. Mine's definitely the San Francisco Maru. That's my favourite. I like the Oiti as well. But but tell me about, what do you like there?
San Francisco was definitely a highlight. I was very, very lucky. We were one of the last trips to actually go this year. In fact, when we were leaving, all of the flights into Truck were cancelled.
Wow.
And some of our party had issues leaving because of the change in the flights. So it was interesting getting out, and people were phoning me from back home saying, listen, are you going to get home before it's all over? So I was very lucky and really grateful that I did manage to get the opportunity. And I do feel for you sitting there back there at home, but at least the wrecks aren't going to go anywhere. They'll be there. They've been there for 7 years. They'll be there for another
well, another one at least.
At least one. There's just nothing quite like, again, it's history, and I love history. It's knowing the backstory which really brings it to life. So knowing exactly why it sank or how it sank, and having a bit of knowledge, and the crew out there and Truckmaster with Dirty Dozen were amazing. They really knew how to tell the story of the wreck. And that, for me, brought it to life. When I was down there, and I could sitting on the bridge or sitting in the engine room, and you can picture the story happening and unfolding around you. You can imagine the bombs coming down or the ship getting struck and suddenly the crew are running around. And you can imagine the mayhem and you can live through the mayhem. And that, for me, was really just spectacular, seeing and visualizing the history. We were also really lucky with Jill Harness, who did a presentation on the island for some school kids. Mm-hmm. And their school is based out of an old Japanese hold. That was incredible as well. We were so well received, really a touching moment. And just listening to these kids who, despite being where they are, wanting to know more about exploration and holding on to every single word that Jill said, that was a really spectacular experience, something that I'll never ever forget.
Yeah, she's amazing with kids too. She does a lot of that work in Canada, I know, from the interview that I did with her as well. And so, it's become one of her specialties, is inspiring school kids to a life of adventure and exploration. And so, I can just imagine what that would have been like. Brilliant. Yeah. We have gone for a good amount of time, and I sincerely appreciate you talking with me and sharing. Especially, I enjoyed hearing about the Phoenician project, obviously, but your perspectives on side mount as well. And I think, what we can do about improving the standard of instruction and the way that you go about things, I think is fantastic. Again, congratulations on your induction into the Explorers Club. It's no small achievement, and not many people get to do that. And so that's fantastic. And again, thanks very much for joining me.
Thanks so much for the invite. It's been great catching up with you, and hopefully another time we'll get to dive together. Another chat, yeah.
I love that. Thanks very much, mate. Catch you soon.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again to all of our patrons for your support. It is immense in helping make this podcast possible. If you're not a patron and you'd like to see what we have to offer, then please go to www.patreon.com/speakingsidemount for all of the information, all of the tier levels, and all of the benefits available. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode. You've been listening to Speaking Side Mount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a 5-star review. If there's something you'd like us to cover on the show, then let us know via our Facebook page listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us on our next episode of Speaking Side Mount.